Are you attracted by the studies of law, but you're looking for an alternative to law practice and court cases? How about human rights? How about sport and human rights? Guido Battaglia studied law and he worked for several years at the World Economic Forum. He's now investing his career to promote the respect of human rights through sports. Enjoy the episode. Guido, what a pleasure to have you on my podcast. Thanks a lot for accepting. I know you're just coming back from Qatar, so thanks for taking some time. You are the head of policy and outreach for Center for Sport and Human Rights. So that's pretty big title. Can you tell me what is your job and what does your organization do?
Yes, thank you, Laura. It's a pleasure to join your podcast. Thank you for the invitation. As the head of policy and outreach of the Center for Sport and Human Rights, I am in charge of engagement with constituents. What it means in practice is that I reach out to people across the sport ecosystem. I reach out to governments, to international organizations, sponsors, broadcasters, and develop a relationship with these actors that are so important in the context of sport. Including also sport bodies, of course. And the idea is to help them navigate and understand issues linked to respect for human rights in the world of sport. And this is really the main objective of our organization. Our organization, the Center for Sport and Human Rights, is the outcome of a process that brought together governments, international organizations, sponsors, sport bodies, trade unions, NGOs, and all they gathered to discuss together, okay, what are the human rights implications of the activity of sport? Sport as an industry, of course, but also sport as the day-to-day activity that we all cherish and enjoy. For a long time, sport has focused on, I would say, the positive aspect of it. The things we all love about sport, its ability to bring us together in a context of rules, of respect, of brotherhood and sisterhood. But sport has also become a big business, a business that drives political, social, economic interest. And as a consequence of that, like any other sector, mining, infrastructure, fast-moving consumer goods, you name any economic system or structure around the world, sport has also to deal with negative impacts and with consequences that may have a negative impact on the rights of people that are involved in sport.
So the Center for Sport and Human Rights is the main goal is to really defend those human rights of the sports athletes.
Yes, it's a good point, Laura. The point is to promote the respect for human rights through sport. And it will be a journey. We're not there yet. We know that when mega sporting events like the World Cup in Qatar, or the Olympics, or the Commonwealth Games, or the Jeux de la Francophonie, any regional or international event linked to sport is organized, there are impacts. There are impacts that may affect the local communities that could be, for example, evicted from specific areas in an unlawful way. There are impacts on workers. And of course, it is in the headlines and in the news, the famous Guardian figure of how many people were impacted and also how many of them died in preparation to the World Cup to construct the stadia and the other infrastructure. But reality is that the sport ecosystem is a very complex one. And it is not only about communities, not only about workers, but it's also about athletes whose rights can also be impacted. It's about fans, supporters that attend the game. It's about journalists. And it's about minorities. We can think about the LGBTQI minority that is not welcome in some regions around the world. We can talk about people with disabilities whose access is always an issue when it comes to sport. And really the idea behind the establishment of the Center for Sport and Human Rights is that there are many complexities, political, social, economical, behind how sport is structured. And it is only through a collective action and response that these issues can be meaningfully addressed. And at the end, there could be really an equivalence between what sport promotes and the values that sport promotes, and then what sport achieves in practice. And this is how sport can really contribute to sustainable development.
So have you done this for a long time?
It's been 5 years now, and it's a very, very new topic, new area. There is a lot of work to be done, which is extremely exciting. And I'm building on the experience I developed with other sectors to include standards and internationally recognized principles to address this issue in industry sectors.
So let's backtrack a bit from your previous experiences that brought you to this job. How does one get to work for, and I imagine it's an NGO, for sports and human rights? What was your path?
My specific path involved 3 key steps. The first one is linked to my education and what I studied at university. I studied law at the University of Milan, graduated in 2008. And my passions there were international trade law, were the implications of globalization and how this impacted people, international law, crime law, and to be honest with you, Laura, I was a bit weaker in areas such as contract law or civil law. They were definitely not my passion. So after graduation and after 2 very interesting years practicing in an international law firm, I decided to move to Geneva, also for family reasons, and I had the opportunity to start a job with the World Economic Forum here in Geneva.
Oh, excellent.
And this is the second step, the second change in my career. And my job at the World Economic Forum was clearly more focused on international relations, public affairs, and there was a sustainability aspect because I was working with the mining sector. I was working with mining companies, with infrastructure companies, and my job was to bring them together and discuss together sustainability issues that were linked to environmental protection, but also social protection of the communities that are involved and affected by the operations of these companies. So I spent 6 years there, which were extremely rewarding. I could travel the world. I was in charge of projects in Africa. I worked in Latin America. There were projects in India. And of course, every year there was the annual summit in Davos, where all the CEOs, high-level politicians, economists, professors were gathering. And it was very, very interesting to convene and to send messages around the work that was done and the objectives for the years to come. This lasted 6-7 years. I also had the opportunity to work then for industry association in London on issues linked to mining and development. But then this experience came to an end quite abruptly. And this is where the third big step in my career happened. And I started engaging with an organization called the Institute for Human Rights and Business, based in London, whose job is really to promote human rights principles in corporate world, in how business operates. I was involved in projects around commodities trading, mining again, and then a project on sport started 5-6 years ago, and I raised my hand. I said, okay, I enjoy sport. This sounds extremely interesting. How can I help? And I joined the team that started working on this topic. And as the debate and the discussions continued, then a center was established in 2018, became a Swiss association in 2021. And now I'm in charge of engagement, as I told you before.
Excellent. That's a great career because it's not easy. You're saying it as if it were easy, but it's actually not easy to enter the likes of the World Economic Forum. It's highly competitive, and there's a waiting list, basically. So, for those who are listening, say, "Oh yeah, I would love to also, join an NGO or the World Economic Forum to do good in the world." What kind of 2 cents would you give them to do in order to reach that goal one day?
I think that there are different dimensions here, Laura. When I joined the World Economic Forum, I was relatively young. I was 25. And of course, I joined a junior position. I was lucky enough to notice that at the time, there was a junior position that was open.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, I remember I had 3-4 interviews, and clearly I was extremely lucky to get an opportunity. I showed my passion for the way the private and the public sector interact. This is something that I always found extremely interesting, the implications of what we do at the corporate level on people, and really try to focus on really what happens to people when certain policies, when certain decisions are applied. This has always been my main interest, my main passion. And yeah, perhaps this interest helped me, and then helped me grow internally, helped me identify different sectors and different areas where probably there was a stronger link between the activity of the organization and the impact on people. I was surrounded by economists, by people that had very strong socio-political skills as well, and maybe they were more interested in analysis, they were more interested in macroeconomic aspects. What I was more passionate about was the impact on people. And sometimes in organizations such as the World Economic Forum, you can really tell that you're working at the macro level, at the high level, and many people question, okay, but what is the real impact? I think that what is extremely interesting is that any decision, any policy has an impact on people. But this requires investigation, this requires deep dive study, this requires further work to really appreciate how can these high-level principles then get translated into what happens on a daily basis. And I think that the connection is there. And if you deep dive into this, you can really find this connection, and you can get really passionate and find a meaning, for all the meetings and all the level discussions that are part of the job there.
So one way to enter this line of work is to apply, of course, as you said. That's step one, which is important. And from what I hear, you've done also a lot of networking. You're not just sat on your couch and wait until a job taps at your door, which is number one. And number two, what else could help in terms of gaining experience? Because when you are also especially fresh out of either university or of your main studies, the employer wants to have a great resume with already some experience and great grades and all of this. So how do you find the way through?
In my case, internships definitely helped. I managed to enter and to benefit from 2 internship opportunities. Okay. One in Milan and one here in Geneva. Okay. So the first one was the European Commission Liaison Office in Milan. And it was very press and communication focused. My task was to monitor the news, scan the news, identify relevant information in the Italian press that could be of interest for the parliamentarians and for the members of the European Commission working in Brussels. So this was very interesting, very rewarding. We were a very young team. We were all 21, 22, 23, and everyone extremely passionate about this. And this lasted 3-4 months, and it was a morning assignment. And my routine those days was I go to the office in the morning, and then in the afternoon, of course, it was about following the lessons and studying for the exams, which was a nice.
So while you were studying, you were also doing the internship. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And then the second one was an opportunity with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Italy, which provides this opportunity to new graduates to join programs in embassies or international missions abroad. So you can work and have a working experience at the bilateral or at the multilateral level. I remember that there were some options when I applied. I was interested in the multilateral aspect. I was interested in the trade aspect of international affairs. So for me, Geneva and the WTO were the first candidate. But I remember that when I scanned the other options and the different opportunities, I saw that there was an opportunity at the Italian consulate in Izmir in Turkey.
Uh-huh.
And then an opportunity at the Italian consulate in Marseille in France. And I don't know why. I thought, okay, clearly multilateralism is my first choice, but what if I get to these countries? That would be extremely interesting as well. There's sliding doors. At the end, it was Geneva, and maybe also because of this opportunity, I also had the opportunity to be considered for my World Economic Forum application, because already I'd spent some time in the city. I don't know, but maybe it helped.
And also, you're talented too.
Thank you. Thank you,
modest. You're modest, so let me say it.
Thank you.
I want to bring the focus again on the organization you work for, and so it's an NGO, right?
It is yes. It is
Okay.
It is an association, Swiss-based association, Swiss association, working with all actors in the world of sport. Yes.
So when you look at your association, what are the roles that would be important? You know, if the young man, young woman of tomorrow, you know, coming out of school or university, what kind of job can they aspire, or what is really important for such an organization in terms of talent and position?
There are many different sets of skills and expertise that could help an organization like the Center for Sport and Human Rights. And of course, we're small, we're growing. The overall topic of promotion and respect of human rights through sport is something that did not exist 10 years ago. And our organization, we were 3 or 4 people 5 years ago. Now we're 15, so we're growing. So just as an introductory remark, Laura, I really hope that the sector will grow and there will be increasing opportunities not only with the center, but also with sport organizations, with sponsors, and with many other economic actors that can really contribute to this topic. But when it comes to profiles, there are very different profiles we can look at. Communication, this is, of course, something absolutely important. Engagement, public affairs, and fundraising are key because it's also about promoting an agenda. It's about sharing a message that people are not really used to hear, and it's about explaining the advantages and the value that focusing on this work could add to the activities of other actors. So there is clearly a public affairs part. And then there is specific expertise on specific areas that are really developing. One is abuse, child rights, athletes abuse. We are hearing news from all around the world around athletes in gymnastics, in ice skating, but really any sport is involved, about, unfortunately, not good practices in terms of trainings and education applied to sport. So people with expertise on child rights clearly could find good opportunities. And then specific expertise on issues such as disability, gender, non-discrimination. These are areas that are really, really evolving. And diversity and inclusion, this is where we will need skills and talent to advance the agenda.
Are these skills that you get on the job, or are there curricula, from universities and maybe postgraduate or graduate studies that give you, lead you to those profiles?
I think it's an evolving trend, and we see more and more faculties and academia around the world engaging and starting business and human rights projects, business and human rights curricula. And when there is also a connection. We also see specific sport and human rights curricula being developed. And this is also one of the priorities of the center. The center's mission is to promote a world of sport that fully respects human rights, and education is at the core of it. So more universities we gather and we convene and we work together with to promote this agenda and to promote some of the principles at the core of our work, then the easier it will be for future management and for people involved in this industry in the future to be more attentive to these issues and to take this important part into account when doing their job.
And if you were to have some of these young people in front of you today, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
It's something I do on a regular basis, and I think it is one of the most rewarding parts of my job. We have meetings with university classes, with students, and I can really tell you that there is a huge interest from the young generation in this topic. And what we do when we engage with them, we start talking about how great sport it is. I think we all agree that sport is fantastic. It makes us happy. It connects us. It makes us feel free, healthy. It's good for education. It's good. It's something really good for all of us. But what sometimes we tend to underestimate or not to consider is that maybe it can be good for us, but in certain cases it's not good for the experience of other people. People may be abused. People may suffer discrimination, may not have access to sport, which is, of course, a human rights issue. People may suffer because of higher interest at stake that do not take into account their needs. So we share examples. And what we also do is that we share examples from athletes and people that took a stand to talk about these topics in the past and now, because clearly they're way more effective than me or any other policy person talking about these issues. There are the examples of Marcus Rashford. I don't know if you know him. He's a Manchester United player that during the pandemics took a very strong stand to protect and to ask that some specific social measures to provide meals for underprivileged people in Manchester were kept and were not dismantled as the government was planning to do. It was a very fantastic example of young, brave players taking a stand for something very important. Another example could be Megan Rapinoe, the captain of the United States women's team. The whole team, and Megan Rapinoe in particular, have been fighting for LGBTQI rights, for equal pay, for social issues for a long time. And in history, there are many examples, and the most famous one is probably the protest of Tommy Smith and John Carlos in 1968 at the Olympics in Mexico, when they celebrated, they made a podium celebration, raising their right hand with a black claw for respect for human rights. That was a very, very strong message. And there was another actor in that podium, an Australian white person called Peter Norman, who had 5 minutes to decide, okay, should I support them? Should I not support them? And in 5 minutes, he took the right decision, and he wore the same pin, Athlete Project for Human Rights, that they were wearing. And he made history. And I found this story extremely fascinating. You have 5 minutes to decide what to do. Are you there to take a stand for the good? Are you going to ignore it? And he did that. And because of that, he was discriminated. He was punished. The federation did not invite him to the next games. When he died, it was Tommy Smith and John Carlos that were there and accompanied him during the funeral, which I find extremely moving and very nice.
That's great. Fortunately, our time is running out so fast. I want to thank you so much for giving examples, practical examples. It's really good, and the fact that you're talking to schools, this is the goal of this podcast too. So that there can be a voice that goes straight to the young people to see what kind of jobs are out there that they could be interested in. So many thanks for sharing your own experience. And all the best for you.
It was really a pleasure, Laura, to contribute, and thank you again for the invitation.
My goal with this podcast is to help you find your career path. By listening to my episodes, you might find an idea that you hadn't thought before or jobs that you didn't know existed. In order for me to help you, I need your help. What are you looking for? What jobs would you like to listen to? Who would you like me to interview? Write me at jobtalespodcast@gmail.com.